We're live.
Good evening, Facebook. My name is Chuck Fagan, and this is a special presentation of the Better Savannah Facebook page. Better Savannah is the Savannah and Chatham County area's leading independent expenditure political action committee focused on progressive policy outcomes here at the state and local level. Tonight, we have a special show about a group of people, small group of people who set out to make some major changes here in Savannah and the Chatham County area. This group originally got together around the issue of recycling and in fact was crucial in forcing the city to start its curbside recycling program. This group got together and ran for office kind of as a guerrilla warfare campaign to try and change the direction of the policy debate in the Chatham County Commission elections for 2008. So tonight on our panel, we were supposed to have four. Unfortunately, Karen Graney was unable to make it, but we've got founder and chairman of Better Savannah and 2008 Republican nominee for Chatham County Commission chairman, former District 3 County Commissioner John McMasters. We've also got friend of the committee, all around environmental policy expert and chairman of the Center for a Sustainable Coast, Mr. Steve Willis here with us. And we've got Jeremy Scheinbart, another candidate from 2008. And our co-moderator tonight will be Stacey Kronquest. Sorry, Stacey. Stacey is a lifelong environmental policy activist and is an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland and was a leader in the decisioning to get the curbside recycling program started here in the city of Savannah. I believe you guys got a lot of that work done in Atlanta as well. I'll be popping in towards the back half of our show tonight to kind of talk about how their experience in 2008 relates to 2021 and beyond, and kind of how it relates to the future of Better Savannah. So without further ado, I want to welcome and turn over the broadcast to Stacey Kronquest so that she can lead our panel discussion tonight. Take it away, Stacey.
Thank you, Chuck. So we're here. How many years later is it, John? 14? 14 years later, when we won up against, well, I did not, but Steve, Jeremy, and Karen went up against the incumbents in the Chatham County Commission race in election in 2008. And that was all born out of the effort that we had in started in 2006, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, to bring recycling, curbside recycling to the city of Savannah and shut the incinerator that the city had. And so it was an interesting time because we had success in the city in bringing recycling and environmental policy to the forefront, and we felt like that needed to happen on the county level as well. And thanks to John, Steve, Jeremy, and Karen, who were brave enough to go up against the incumbents, who at the time were mixed Republican, Democrat commission, ran as a group against any challengers. And so I think it was right before, maybe 5 years before, the movement for an everyday person who could go up and not a lifelong politician, to challenge incumbents on issues and run for election. And I would like to just ask, was it a difficult decision to run for election, and what was the hardest part of that whole process? And keeping in mind that we want to talk to people who could potentially be considering running for local or state office.
Well,
John? And you were a county commissioner. You were elected as, I should say this. You were elected as county commissioner back in 2007, Four?
2002 to the end of
So
2004. I had
Okay, so you were a county commission, you ran the first time and you won.
right.
And let's just go back to that. Why did you run back in 2002? I mean, you're a businessman, an entrepreneur. What did you see that made you feel like you wanted to put your hat in the ring and put yourself in public office? You know, that's a big decision.
Well, it was, and I was very monochromatic at that point. You know, we're talking 20 years ago almost, and my single issue was property tax reform at the time, because I had our house and an apartment building, and the name of the game back then was run around and create more revenue for the city and county budgets by increasing the values of principally the landings, homes, and downtown. And everybody else kind of got left alone. It was a lazy methodology that the Board of Assessors was employing. And being from California, where Proposition 13 had been in effect for 25 years, I just took an interest in property tax policy, and I could see that it was unfair. So before I ran, I got myself thrown out of a Board of Assessors meeting by the sheriffs. They didn't want to let me speak, and I said it was a public meeting, and one thing led to another, and a reporter was there and wrote about it. So I guess I started to, for lack of better words, build my brand through that infamous moment of being escorted out of the Montgomery Street Courthouse by the sheriff. So when my district representative had to resign in kind of a Zippergate situation, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, you should run." So end of story, I ran and I won by 11 votes, razor thin margin. I wasn't supposed to win, but I did. So anyway, that's where I landed, and then did not get reelected and just got more frustrated with the system and decided to, you know, cobble everybody together in a experimental, you know, guerrilla style effort to run against the establishment.
Steve?
Well, I think what John just said reminded me of a Chekhov quote. Chekhov said, "It takes God to know the difference between victory and defeat." And I think that that's a pretty interesting notion, because I think that our running in 2008, at John's provocation, I think John, I told everybody that, look, you know, how else could you better learn about Chatham, Savannah politics than getting a McMaster's degree? So anyway, it seemed like a really good idea. Plus, I had my own story. I think everybody's got their own story about why they get involved in politics. But my story is this. In 2006, I went to Glacier National Park, and I stayed there for 6 weeks in a teepee, a Sioux Indian teepee. And I'm a painter, so I was painting around there. And I looked high and low for a glacier. It's Glacier National Park, but there's no glaciers there. They had all melted. And the reason I went there was I wanted to see a glacier at Glacier Park before they melted, because I knew they were going to melt. All the scientists said they were going to melt, and they did. And so that was a disappointment and a kind of a shock. Then the next year, 2007, Al Gore's book and his documentary came out. And at that point, I think everybody that was interested started to get a pretty good idea of how dire the threats we're facing are. And the book was an inconvenient truth, which is it's very inconvenient to know that you're destroying the house, you're burning down the house you're living in. And a lot of people would rather just pretend like they don't notice or don't believe it. But it's pretty obvious that the scientists were right and still are right. And so between my personal interest in learning more about local politics and my growing concern about us destroying our climate, our atmosphere, our planet, I decided it was a good idea to run. And so I did. And I really just wanted to mainly learn myself and get people thinking outside the box. And I think it worked really well with me. I was thinking a lot more after I finished. In terms of getting people to think out of the box, I don't know. I really, I think that story is yet to be concluded, like Chekhov might say. We don't know where that's going to go. But it does seem like a lot of people, especially young people, that are faced with a very iffy future. And the people that care about their legacy and the people that care about their offspring and their children, I think that there's a growing sense that, we better do something. But I think it's really interesting to keep in mind in that movie, An Inconvenient Truth, all the scientists that Al Gore quoted, they said we had to really get going by 2011. If we weren't really moving by 2011, we're going to be facing future challenges that will be difficult or impossible to handle. Now it's, 2 years ago, 2018, the International Panel on Climate Change came out and said, if we don't get things together by 2030, we're going to really be facing irreversible destruction of our planet, of life on our planet. And this is just a fact. And now there's a lot of people like President Biden that have decided that it's just, people can't keep pretending that we don't need to do anything. So anyway, the point of all that is everybody's got their reasons to get involved. But if you don't get involved, if you don't change government policy, don't expect to really make the changes that are needed or make any significant changes. Changes come from politics.
Both you and John you were driven by your issues that you're very passionate about to run for election. Is that similar to, Jeremy? Why did you do that very brave thing and get into the race?
Why'd you throw yourself on the bonfire with that?
Well, it kind of was. It kind of was that way. I really wasn't sure. I kind of went back and forth with whether I wanted, to run or not. And it was honestly, it was scary at the time, to be quite honest. I think I was 2 years out of college. About as thin as resume as anybody ever had to run for office, so that was a concern. And but ultimately I figured, when would the stars align like this again, to do something like this? It was, and maybe experience in politics isn't, the best thing in the world either. Maybe a little inexperience is good. Maybe you don't know what you can and can't do. But yeah, so I ended up, running for office, and it was, it turned out to be a fantastic time. It was, nothing really to say to anybody out there. There's nothing to be, scared of, to put yourself out there if you're running for the right reasons and you want to, help people and do good. And, I'd say go for it, do it.
Did you have a main issue that you felt passionate about?
Well, we were kind of in the midst of all the environmental stuff at the time. So, curbside recycling, I wanted to bring that out to the islands. I was interested in the bus fleet, either going electric or something, hydrogen, or I think, which they ended up doing within the next year or two after that. But yeah, just general kind of environmental issues.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, nobody was elected, but the issues that you ran on really steered policy.
Yeah.
That's the biggest takeaway from the experiment, because none of us, and anybody that's watching this needs to know this, none of us anticipated winning. We knew the day that we paid our $400 filing fee and signed the paperwork that we weren't going to win the election, which is completely counterintuitive to most competitive, situations. But we operated on the theory that we could, if we coordinated our policy perspectives and talking points, that maybe, just maybe, from all the press that we would get free as candidates from the newspaper and the 4 TV stations and community meetings and forums, that we would have a cumulative effect. And I'm hopeful and sure that later we'll talk about a couple specific outcomes that did produce policy change that we had hoped for, although we lost the election. So
yeah, I think now is the perfect time. So what kind of policy, what did your discourse add to policy, and how did it change?
Well, Jeremy's already mentioned the bus fleet, because at the time, CAT was run by the county commission. It's now more of a hybrid board, but back then it was the 9 county commissioners and 2 citizen appointees. And the phrase at the time, the tagline for CAT was a world-class transportation system. And we all decided that with a fleet of diesel buses, that rang a little hollow. So each of us, in our remarks to the press and elsewhere, is we criticized the labeling of the system as world-class transportation. And we said simply, how can it be called that when they're running these old school diesel buses? And I don't want to take all the time here, but by late summer, the county manager was being told by the incumbents who we were running against to help out. So they modified the contract with Gillig, the bus manufacturer out in California, I think in San Jose or Modesto, and they canceled most of the order and went to hybrid buses, which was a little diesel and a little not diesel. So they immediately, the incumbent started to say, well, look, we just ordered clean buses. So you should reelect us because we're on top of it. So that's one example, Stacey, of the collective consciousness of these these challengers to the incumbents actually caused a change in policy at the ground level.
What is the second one?
I think I'd like to follow on to that a little bit.
Go ahead.
I think that what happened is that we did have some spin-offs in local politics that were very useful and effective. But I think if you think about the whole pattern of the last decade, we ran in 2008 with Obama. Obama was sort of like we were on his coattails, more or less. And we ran together. Okay, we lost. Obama won. But we showed that people, just people, average people, not insiders, not inside baseball politicians, we could run. And actually, Karen Graney came very close to winning her race.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I think we presented a possibility. We put a possibility on the table. And Obama did too. And then, not that long afterwards, Stacey Abrams came within a hair of becoming the governor. And then she came back and she started really pounding the drums. Let's make elections fair. And she did a really good job of that. And as a consequence, now Georgia, when 10 years ago, people would said, there's no way anybody that's not a Republican, anybody that's not an O-liner, anybody that's not an inside baseball person is ever going to get any kind of political victory in Georgia. All of a sudden, we have 2 senators that have changed the composition in Washington. And so what I'm saying is, it's not just what Obama does. It's not just what people like John and the people that ran for office here do. I think if you're going to break the ice up, you got to have people coming at it from all different sides. And I think we did. And I think it's a good thing we did, because if we hadn't have had that movement started at all levels, I'm not sure where we would be for the next 4 years.
Well, let me comment on that. Jeremy, I'm sorry I'm jumping in here, but
no, go for it.
okay. What we did, what was kind of unique just in the political candidacy of an election situation. Today, Savannah's got, so much has emerged and developed from not only what we did, but let me pay tribute to Emma and Lee Adler, who in the late 50s or early 60s were aghast at the fact that the city tore down the original DeSoto Hotel, an absolutely magnificent piece of architecture, and the train depot on MLK got scotched to build a flyover for I-16. So they in their own right, they organized like-minded people like we did and confronted the system, the city specifically, and somewhat the county, and they said, we've got to stop tearing down these treasures. And they were successful. And also the civil rights movement here, between the passage of the legislation in the 60s and how slow it was to adapt here. There's a lot of people that led the way, W.W. Law, Otis and Edna and their generation and the generation before them were change agents too, in a much bigger sense. I don't want to make it sound like we set the world on fire. We did in a very small pocket of it in one county election, but it hopefully gave encouragement and some optimism to other people to realize that, you know what, you should run for office. You can make a difference. We shouldn't avoid being a public servant. We should embrace it. We should, out of a sense of community and responsibility, we should challenge the status quo when the status quo is off base, and the status quo around here is way off base. There's a lot of contemporary people. Julius Hall in the African American community is doing a incredibly good job of trying to control the narrative of what's really going on in elected positions and policy here. Keisha Gibson Carter is doing a fantastic job of speaking truth to power and not caving to the oppression of the Savannah Morning News or the Chamber of Commerce or the other side of the aisle that she has to deal with. So anyway, I just wanted to say that we may not seem that humble, but really we are, and we stand on the shoulders of a lot of people that challenge the status quo. Our hope is just that more people will join us.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So if you think about the fact that you had this slate, correct? You had the slate focused on environmental issues where all of you have went in different segments to have an impact on local policy. So if you pose the question to everyone on the panel, what would that answer be, and where they have put their time and energy and invest to take that platform on in the local community? What has that legacy look like since this time?
Carrie, I've been part of a group of people that advocated the resolutions to have 100% clean energy in Savannah, which I think is probably the most ambitious and the most meaningful environmental thing that's happened in Georgia probably ever. There just isn't anything else like that. We've gotten the city council to overwhelmingly vote to take whatever actions are necessary to eliminate dirty energy in Savannah. And that's a huge step forward. That's like on par with the most advanced countries in Europe. And so I think that's what people have got to understand. There were consequences. And I think the election, the total changeover of the Savannah government last year was absolutely an example of how the old, frozen, stuck in the mud political insider system had been broken up.
It was a revolution. It was
a revolution. And that revolution led to the resolutions, which are the most advanced commitment of any municipality, any city in Georgia. And so, yeah, I think that's the result. That's, you can't say this caused that directly, but there's no question about it. You can see a trend, and there is a trend, and I think we've been part of it.
Indeed. Jeremy, the police shortage. You can talk about that, right? Didn't we identify? It's the same thing today. There's still short officers.
Right. Yeah, no, that was a big issue that we tackled. I think they hired more after that because we made it kind of a large issue. In terms of environmentalism or in the community afterward, pretty much right afterward, I started a job installing solar panels. So that took me in and out of town. I was doing that for about 5 years. But still, when I could support candidates, did a lot of door-to-door activity and, candidates down in Tybee. But yeah.
Yeah, let's remind everybody who they ran against. I ran for chairman against Pete Lukakis. Steve?
I ran for District 1 against Helen Stone.
She's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought there was some kind of a cap on how many times they could be elected, but I guess
it might be time for a second try. Are you up for it, Steve?
Well, yeah.
We'll talk about it.
I would like to say something about the actual election itself. And I think everybody should know one thing, and that is we ran and the establishment tried to rig the system against us. There's no question about it. I believe it was the Savannah Morning News put on a debate. Now you got to remember, this is the age of Pete Lukakis. And Pete Lukakis had one mission in life, and that's to get all the people, all the commissioners to totally be like bosom buddies and live together. And he achieved it. They all worked together. It was like the team, the Pete Lukakis team. Now, were they interested in the things outside their own personal team effort? I don't know. But anyway, what they decided to do was to have a debate. And there was the three of us, and we were going to debate against, we thought, our opponents, the people that we were trying, the incumbents. What they decided to do, and what the paper, the Savannah Morning News, decided to do, was to say, oh no, I think since they're a team, every single one of them should get equal time. So we had 9 people, 6 of them weren't being opposed, all running against us 3. And you know what? Everybody I've talked to has said that they thought that we did such a good job and they did such a bad job that we won the debate. And which is not surprising. They had one member that answered every question by saying he didn't know enough about the subject to answer. And so they really were a kind of a, you know, not every one of them, but overall, they didn't make a very good showing. But the fact that the paper thought it was a legitimate thing to have 9 incumbents run against the 3 challengers and have equal time shows how absolutely beyond any sense of integrity and fairness that, well, the Savannah Morning News has.
How important do you think it is when you're a challenger running up against the status quo to have a team? I mean, you know, this you clearly had, you know, John is a Republican, Steve, Karen, Jeremy, or I'm not sure, Jeremy, if you're a Democrat or not, but I mean, it was bipartisan, and you had kind of each other's backs, right? But
Yeah.
how important is it to have that team spirit if you know, if you're just like a one person out there and you don't have everybody else, and you don't have a political, you know, a group. If you're interested in running for office, I mean, you go to your Democratic or Republican Party and you try to get your team on there, or how, if you're just one person, is a team that important?
It was, I'll jump in. It was, for me at the time, knowing that I had, you know, people that were out there saying the same thing and basically, you know, had my back, you know. So I think for me, it was specifically important at the time.
Well, let's remember it was a suicide mission. I know that's a terrible choice of words, but we all knew from the jump that we were only going to try to shift the narrative and push some policy. We weren't going to get elected. And the interesting point, I'm glad you brought it up, Stacey, is the incumbents between the Democrats and the Republicans, all of a sudden running against us, forgot their party unity, and they became a team. Mm-hmm. And staff at the county level, you know, Pat Monahan in that summer of 2008 put together a 6-page memo about all the possible environmental changes that this commission would undertake and the few that they were doing. I mean, the recycling center on Eisenhower Drive is a direct result of our candidacies in 2008, expecting the county to develop a curbside recycling program.
And John, let me jump in here and ask, was that not after you guys had been involved in the same thing in the city the year before?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You know, so you know, remembering that, I think it was the Article 9, you know, powers in the state constitution, which is the power of petition of government, became such a you know, powerful pressure tool on the establishment that Mayor Otis Johnson and, believe it or not, a familiar name, City Manager Michael Brown, implemented that the year before when you were running for mayor.
That's correct. And actually, maybe Stacey can share with us, because she was the point person in the recycling effort. And tell us, Stacey, who called you to ask for a meeting to see if we could come to terms and not submit our petition with signatures.
And not send it into election, you know, have it be a ballot, decided in ballot. Right. Michael Brown did, you know, and you know, I think that's the really the power to petition and cause a referendum on an issue is really important. Just you know, 2 years before that, when I had the first petition that was just a, you know, on petition.com, and it was asking the city to shut the incinerator and establish a curbside recycling program. Otis Johnson, who was mayor then, who's since become a friend, but we didn't know each other at that point. I asked for a meeting with him, and I brought my 7,000 petitions to his office, and he said, the incinerator is not going anywhere. And that's that. And so that power to cause a referendum was a game changer. And you brought that to me, John. And it still lives in the Georgia Constitution, and nobody knows more about it than John McMaster.
Stacey, let me ask you a follow-up question, because I first met Otis Johnson in 2007 in college, speaking at one of my classes. Like, you know, I've always had the highest, utmost respect for this guy. But a lot of times our leaders, people who on a personal level that we have respect for and respect their history in this community, they are trapped or bound by the political restraints of the establishment and status quo. And I just want you to talk about that dynamic of having to force the mayor to do this, because you guys at the time started the wheels going on that mechanism within the state law, which could have completely circumvented the mayor and council and forced them to do it.
Right. Well, you know, he was looking at it from an economic point of view. The incinerator, the city of Savannah floated a $50 million bond. It was the largest bond that they've ever issued to pay for the construction of the incinerator. So, you know, to be fair, he was looking at it from an economic interest. You know, when he left his second term, he said one of his proudest achievements was establishing a curbside recycling program. So he needed that, you know, he evolved, he grew, he changed, I think it's nothing but respect for Mayor Johnson.
I was a speaker.
Sometimes we have to really, it's like moving a mountain sometimes. But it, you know, one person, two or three, a group, we got a movement. We had people all over the city who were behind us. The city attorney, Mr. Blackburn, the city attorney, he signed our petition for a referendum. He signed it, and he and his wife did. I mean, this is, you know, people were behind it. It got swept up, and there was no turning back to the old way. The old way was gone, and that doesn't happen very often in Savannah.
I think I was a speaker at the every year there's a thing called the Red Clay Conference at the University of Georgia, and it's all the law students at the University of Georgia get together, and they have speakers. And I was there, a speaker about environmentalism, about sea rise and coastal risks and things. But I knew Otis, and he knew me, and he was the MC. He was the master of ceremonies. He was the guy in charge. He was the chair of this thing. And he was up there, and hundreds of these law students. And he stood there, and I think you would have been very proud if you'd seen this. He said exactly what you just said to all these law students. He said, you know, there were people with this petition trying to get single stream recycling in Savannah. And I thought it was kind of a boutique thing, kind of a, you know, elite progressive sort of a thing. And I'm not sure he used those words exactly, but that's what he said. And he says, but then they came to me with the signatures of all these people. And he said, I realized that this is something that people of Savannah really want. And who am I to stand in the way of that?
That's right. So that's right.
He said to all these people, all these lawyers, he said, that was the proudest moment when they installed the recycling program. That was the thing I'm most proud of. That's what he said to all these people. So he didn't just say it to the to people that really were dying to hear him say that. He said it all over the place.
John, you wanted to say something, and then I want to ask Jeremy and Carrie a question.
Oh, I just quickly, we really owe Jimmy Blackburn a debt of thanks. He contacted Stacey and I and helped us understand there was a pitfall that could be fatal to our effort in obscure Georgia law, which Sewell Brumby never mentioned as legislative counsel in Atlanta, and we had not found it. And it was the fact that there was a little piece of amendment to that law that said that municipalities petitions only have 60 days to collect signatures. 2 months.
It's not a lot of time.
Conversely, at the county, that does not apply. There's no clock whatsoever at the county. You could collect for years. So if Jimmy had not given us that avuncular sage-like advice, we might have been in a world of hurt. So thanks for remembering Jimmy Blackburn. He was our friend.
Yeah.
Jeremy, Carrie, 2008, I was in Statesboro in college, and you guys were kind of the young Democrats on the scene. Carrie, I think about people like George Seaborough at the time, Gunnar Hall, a lot of these people who seemingly, secured a lot of Democratic victories. We won the district attorney's seat in 2008. In all likelihood, we really won the sheriff's race, but Al St. Lawrence somehow pulled that out one more time. Just an interesting backstory on that, obviously. But I want to talk about one of my favorite podcasts is a podcast called Why Is This Happening? From Chris Hayes on MSNBC. And, a lot of people wonder, how did Savannah get where it is now? And we've got this good story this last 30 minutes here of kind of 2006 to 2008 and what kind of happened from 2008 to 2011, kind of between the transition from Otis to Edna and where those young Democrats kind of went. Because Carrie, you ran against Buddy Carter, Jack Kingston, I think, you were in and around just after this, tour in 2008 that Steve, Jeremy, and John were in. So Jeremy, why don't you talk about, kind of your experience organizing and trying to keep things going after 2008?
Yeah. Incidentally, I actually ran again for a state house seat against Ben Watson, that was his first year, or he ran that year, his first time running, I think. And that one was a little bit more for real. I actually had yard signs and like cards to give out people. You know what I mean? Like people were trying to give me money. So that was also a fun experience as well. But yeah, that's kind of where I went with it after we ran the first time.
What year was that, Jeremy?
Oh gosh, I think that was 10.
So that was the year that Eric Johnson ran for governor in the primary. And so he vacated that state Senate seat. And that would have been the year that Buddy Carter ran for that state Senate seat, right, Carrie? And you ran against him?
Mm-hmm. I had 32% of the vote. We had $1,500. Well, I wanted to back up and make sure that people, I was my own campaign manager. And, I didn't get much support. I did get a lot of support from the party, but not in ways that you would think. But I want to give credit because I had to sit on something over the last couple of days that really made me think of what was different about that time too. And it was Miguel Camacho, who was the candidate recruiter and spent time vetting all of us and actually saying, Jeremy, Carrie, George, Tawana, anybody who was either going to be running for office or was going to be organizing, you need to go to this candidate school. You need to learn how to run a campaign. But the other thing is, you know, if you think about back to 2006, coming into 2008, you had 8 years of George W. Bush that was a catalyst for everybody to get involved and get organized. So you had everybody in the get involved. And there was I remember Jeremy, myself, George, and even that's when Moncello Stewart got involved. That's when, Ted Terry was down here. We had a lot of young people, and like we weren't afraid to go to the local bar, hangout spot, have a little conversation, have a beer, and talk about what we had learned and what we were going to do, and how that change was going to be made. All of us had all these different interests, but we were like-minded in the ability to not have our egos on our shoulders, and that we were just there and we were trying to learn from everyone, So I have to give Miguel Camacho some credit, because he was sort of like our godfather in a way, looking over at us like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How can I help?
Yeah, I mean, Miguel was the former statewide, I think, vice chairman for candidate recruitment for the DPG, the Democratic Party of Georgia. So, I mean, at a time or another, he was a major force in Democratic Party politics. I'd like to think some of that's still true to this day, although I know, he's got a lot of things on his plate. He's a good guy, over the years. But I do think that when you look at this panel between all 6 of us, you're almost looking at the last, connection to the last 25 years of politics in Savannah. John, Steve, you guys have been at it for a long time. I could make some jokes here, but I won't.
Thank you.
And, Jeremy, Carey, and I have really been in and around the last decade or decade and a half. And so I kind of moved to Savannah in 2012, got really acclimated with everything, running a primary congressional campaign for Amy Tavio in 2014, when Jack Kingston was running for Senate and Buddy Carter was first running for the House. And ever since then, I've been in and around either the Democratic Party and then more recently, Better Savannah. And so, we started this organization, John did, to kind of put together an organization that can help level the playing field for candidates like you guys were in 2008. And we were just talking a little while ago about the 2019 city elections. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and how it relates to what we can do in the future by bringing more people together. Because in 2019, for the first time, probably in history, you saw what people would call a clean sweep, right? Steve, you brought up the newspaper earlier, and the 2019 elections was the last election that the Savannah Morning News did endorsements for. Does anybody here know how many of their endorsements won their elections?
Last year, 0.
The big fat 0.
Yeah.
Right. So, Savannah Morning News endorsed all the incumbents in 2019, and they all lost. They all lost. Right. And, that should show Savannians that if we come together on a platform of good policy, anything's really possible. Right. Now, just so happens to turn out that a majority of the city council candidates in 2019 adopted a platform that Better Savannah is really pushing, right? Those who did won their elections, for the most part. So what we're looking to do, I think, in the future here is bring together multiple generations of people who are knowledgeable, but not even, nobody has to be an expert. You guys weren't inside, ball players when you did this. You guys were just average citizens. A lot of people think that we're just super connected and, you know, all of us we're born into this or something. We've just been at this so long that from the outside looking in, it just looks like we're all, you know, inside baseball players, but that's only because we've been doing this a while, right? You know, the reason we're getting things done these days is because, you know, we ran and failed earlier, or, you know, we pushed this policy as far as possible. And rather than face the voters on it, the establishment finally buckled and decided that they would give that policy some due consideration. I mean, there's really nothing as powerful as that of an idea whose time has come. And that was true for recycling in the mid 2000s. It's true for, you know, development and impact fees, you know, here in this day. It's true for port container fees coming off the port for a permanent revenue source to deal with the mitigation efforts and the environmental impact that that port expansion is going to have on us. You know, these ideas have come. They are an idea whose time has come, and we need to fight for them. And so I just want to get everybody's perspective on what we think Better Savannah and you know, everybody can contribute going forward, because that's what we're really trying to do here in 2021 is organize, build, so that when the election season comes back around in the next 2 years, we have a chance to really make some big change.
Chuck, I'd like to respond to that.
Go, Steve.
I think that that's a really good question. And I think that I'd like to say, I'm bragging a little bit, but last year when we had the climate march here, we had 1,000 people show up. There's never been an environmental action I know in Savannah ever that had more than 50 at the most. And all of a sudden 1,000 people show up. And I think that that had a real impact on a lot of people. None of the incumbents in the city government had any interest in that march. None of them had any interest in global warming. But nobody was going to have a march. But I said I was going to have a march if I had to march by myself. And pretty soon there were 3, 4, and all of a sudden there were more and more. And then the TV stations got involved. Even the Savannah Morning News got involved. And all of a sudden we had, by far per capita, the biggest march that there's ever been for environmental issues in Georgia. And I think that you're looking for issues that'll be important for the next rest of your life. And I think environmentalism, especially global warming, is one, because next summer people are going to notice it even more. Having the hottest year ever is always one thing. This year, whatever this year is, it's the hottest. And it's really important. I mean, I think that if we need to tie global warming, politics, and the future of young people and the responsibility of old people together. And I don't think there's many people that are talking about that, but more and more people are realizing that that's what we should be doing. And I think we can help them talk about it.
Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right, Steve. I mean, nowhere, we're in the low country where we already have roads that are impassable.